I was working at a bowling alley. I ran the restaurant at a bowling alley, and we had a television, and there came a very short clip of the president putting the Medal of Honor on Roger Donlon. And he just, standing so tall and so straight. And now, because of the military people in my family, I was very aware of what the Medal of Honor was. And I thought, wow, when I grow up, I'd like to be a soldier like him.
In 1965, after finishing high school, Sammy Davis enlisted in the Army. His father had been an artilleryman during World War II, and he volunteered to do the same. Upon the completion of training, he requested to be sent to Vietnam.
Our job was to provide close and continuous support to the infantry. That's the artilleryman's job. So we would sometimes have to fire almost continuously for 8 or 10 hours. As long as the enemy was attacking our infantrymen, you had to do your job. And then you may lay around for a day or 2 days and not do much. Then you cleaned everything and painted everything and polished your bullets. Sergeant James Gant from Lansing, Michigan, he was the meanest sergeant I ever seen in my life, and he would make us take each bullet out of our clip every night before it got dark and polish it. He was just a bitter old man. Sergeant Gant was 27 years old. He was just a bitter old sergeant, and that's why he was picking on us.
On November 18, 1967, Davis's unit was airlifted to a tiny island in the Mekong Delta near Cai Lay, Vietnam. American infantrymen were already heavily engaged in the area when Davis and his fellow gunners arrived.
So we landed at 8 o'clock in the morning. As soon as we spread the trails on the 105 howitzer, we started firing, and we fired the weapon all day. Just before dark, the enemy broke contact, so therefore we were able to quit firing, and a helicopter, one of our helicopters, came in and sat down, and a major got out. And he said, your probability of getting hit tonight is 100%. So prepare yourselves. He got back in his helicopter, and away he went. At 2 o'clock exactly, and I remember because I looked at my watch, we heard mortars sliding down the tube, which is a very distinctive sound, and to hear them sliding down the tube, you got to be pretty close. And I said immediately, I said, well, when did we move in mortars? And Hart said, we didn't. The mortars were just raining down. And at 2:30 exactly, the mortars quit. It was this eerie quiet. We looked at each other, and we heard whistles being blown like a coach has, and orders being shouted in English. And basically what they were saying was, go kill the GI. Sergeant Gant said, okay boys, this is it. So we grabbed a beehive round, set it on muzzle action, loaded it in the tube, and we were standing there at our position ready for him. I was waiting for Sergeant Gant to tell me to fire. Now, I knew not to fire until he said fire, no matter what was happening, and I could see the enemy all around us. They were doing mass assault waves. Then he said fire, and I pulled the lanyard. Well, the weapon went off, did its job, but the enemy had set up a rocket right across the river from me. And when I fired it, they fired at my muzzle blast. When it hit the shield, it blew me off the piece. It also hit Sergeant Gant right in the chest. And the last thing I can remember was Sergeant Gant just disappearing into the darkness. Well, the enemy started turning my howitzer around, supposedly to turn it and fire it at our guys. If I'd been awake, I would have known that our next gun back was going to fire a beehive round. Standing rule is you never let the enemy take control of the weapon. Common sense. But I was not, I was unconscious. So when the enemy started picking my howitzer up to fire it, Bill Few from Rising Sun, Ohio, fired the beehive. A beehive round effectively turns the 105 howitzer into a shotgun. It fires 18,000 little darts, beehive darts. From mid-thigh up to and including my 4th lumbar vertebra, I had about 30 beehive holes that just passed through me. I had a flak jacket on, which is the only thing that saved my back. When they fired the beehive at me, it woke me up, and I rolled over and I rolled face up. in the bottom of my foxhole, and I'm looking up, and I could see all these pretty lights going right over the top of my foxhole, and I thought, wow, it's just like Christmas. My hearing went like turning the stereo from 0 to 50. You know, went from hearing nothing within just a very short period of time. It got loud enough that the smoke started clearing out of my head, and I'm starting to realize what's happening, and those weren't just pretty lights, they were tracers. So I kind of raised up on one elbow, and I looked down, and there was 150 to 200 enemy right there. Well, I picked up my M16. I had 12 clips, which is roughly about 180 rounds. And I started doing my job as a soldier. It was just like living in a bad dream. You know, no matter what I did, it's like I wasn't doing nothing to them. It was a reinforced battalion. It was 1,500 against 42 kids, and they just kept coming. Well, I fired the last rounds, and I didn't think that I was probably going to see daylight, but I wasn't going to quit. You know, because I thought, well, if I don't do my job, those guys behind me ain't got a chance. So I thought, well, I'll see if I can get off one round from the howitzer. So I scrounged around, found a beehive round, set it on muzzle action, found the canister that had not been fired, had to find the powder because we'd had everything set up nice and orderly, and naturally the mortars had blown everything askew. Now the enemy's still doing their job. I mean, they're everywhere. So I was having to hide and lay in the water, and they'd run over me, and finally when I found all the components and I loaded the piece, I pulled the lanyard. The gun didn't go off. It went, when I pulled the lanyard, it went pop, and my heart just sunk, you know, because this was my last effort. But I could feel the gun kind of going. And then it went off, and it went boom. I had overcharged it. Figured I was only going to get one round. I wanted it to be maximally effective, so I filled the canister full of loose powder. Later they told me, says, yeah, man, we thought that you had rigged up some kind of big flamethrower or something because of all that wet powder. That's why it didn't go off immediately. Well, I was still alive. I thought, well, maybe I can get off one more round. Well, I one more rounded it until I had heard someone across the river shouting, "Don't shoot, I'm a GI." And I seen Gwendell Holloway, my brother, standing up waving these boonie hats saying, "Don't shoot, I'm a GI." And I said, my God, somebody's got to go get him. By this point, my body was in real feeble condition, and I knew I couldn't just run down there and swim across the river. So I thought, well, I'll find an air mattress. That's what the Army had given us to sleep on. So I crawled down to the river, swam across the river, stashed the air mattress in the bushes, and started making back to where I'd last seen Gwendell standing. There was a foxhole there. And instead of just one man being in it, there were 3 men in it. Well, I knew I didn't have the strength to make 3 trips. It had taken me about 45 minutes to make that trip over to that point. And I was just getting so tired. So I asked the man above to give me the strength to carry all 3 of my brothers at one time.
Despite his massive injuries and the unremitting ferocity of the Viet Cong attack, Davis made 2 agonizing trips across the river, shuttling his wounded companions to relative safety.
They pulled Jim up on the bank and started doing what they could for him, and I started crawling back to help Bill Few's guys when I came across my Mino Sergeant Gant. About half his body was in water, had this big hole in his chest, and he couldn't talk, but he picked his hand up. And I thought, my sergeant wants me to hold his hand. So I kind of crawled up and I grabbed a hold, and I still was hoping that he was going to tell me what to do next, you know. And I grabbed a hold of his hand and I looked down in his eyes. The light bulb that comes on in your head that your daddy always told you about, the light bulb came on. All these things that he had, you know, polishing the bullet, the beehive round, setting the time fuse on it, setting out in 100-degree heat with a blindfold. Sergeant Gant shared with us the things that he knew was going to help us survive. And when I looked down in his eyes, I knew that he didn't hate me, that he loved me. You got to love somebody a whole lot to pick on them and teach them things. Jim Deister was one of the last people that we loaded on the helicopters. He was with our dead. The medic in the helicopter seen a bubble come up through the chest wound that Jim had in his chest. He'd been shot in the chest also. And took his stethoscope off and put it on his heart and had a heartbeat. And Jim Deister is alive and well today, living in Salina, Kansas. I got to hold Jim Deister's grandbabies. What an awesome feeling, knowing that if I hadn't done my job when I was just a kid, that this precious little thing would not be here. There were 11 of us left standing that morning out of the 42 that started, 12 counting me. The other 11 men are the men that put me in for this. I didn't do anything heroic. I did my job. That's what soldiers do. And if there was one of these given that night, there should be at least 42 of them. Because if any one of us had not done their job, there would be none of us alive. It sounds silly, perhaps, to say that I went to war and found out about love. What real love is? You know, I didn't go to war to kill people. I went to war because I loved my daddy. I wanted him to be proud of me. I went to war because I loved my grandpas and I loved my country. And when I got over there, the reason why we fought so hard was because we discovered we loved each other, that we were all we had. And they became brothers. We became brothers. And that's lasted up, you know, it's been 36 years, and those men that I fought with are still my brothers. So I learned about what real love is.